Let me say a pleasant good evening to the PSA First Vice President, Comrade Felisha Thomas. Good evening, ma'am.
Pleasant good evening, Mikey, and pleasant good evening to your viewership.
Yes, indeed. Happy May Day.
Thank you so much.
Right. And of course, I know you gathered in South earlier today, that is, and it was all about the theme Unite to Fight, which
Yes.
brought together all the members of the unions and what have you. Unite to Fight. When you look at that theme, I mean, what are you fighting?
Well, Mikey, we continue to fight as a labor movement, fight united for improved work terms and conditions on behalf of our membership.
You know, and there was also a call but from some of the other unions for change on a governmental level. And you and I have spoken about this before right here on this show, as far as not a labor-friendly government. I mean, you are out there so many times, sometimes you are out there, sometimes twice, three times a week, dealing with an issue, if not HDC, I believe also as well as Wasa and all and other state enterprises. And it has been quite challenging. And I say to you, comrade, and to all the others there in solidarity, we, the workforce and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we understand and we applaud your efforts. But at the same time, there seems to be nothing giving on the side of the government to show that they are definitely behind that of the working class.
Correct. Yes, Mikey, and if you heard my speech today, I would have said in my speech today that where governments stand against labor, they shall be removed. Mikey, because today is May Day and is a celebration of the achievements of labor, and particularly the 8-hour workday. But the more things change, the more they remain the same. That today we see the proliferation of contract work as a means of control and exploitation in the workplace. That after we, the trade union movement, fought for an 8-hour workday, that workers are now given contracts without any specified hours of work. And they are being told once there's work to be done, they have to work. That there's no consideration, Mikey, for work-life balance anymore in the workplace. That as a worker, persons are unable to plan their lives and make simple decisions regarding things like picking up children from school. And more so, Mikey, more and more persons, working class citizens, are unable to make long-term plans. That you can't make a decision to purchase a home because that is hinged upon a guaranteed income which will cover the life of the loan. And therefore, through the proliferation of contract work, while many may have a place to call home, a place where you may lay your head at night, many working class citizens are homeless. And as time goes on, we see the continued erosion of workers' terms and conditions through deliberate attacks by the government, and I want to say in particular this government, on the trade union movement. When you spoke about HDC, and it is one of the places, yes, Mikey, that you would see me agitating for better terms and conditions on behalf of workers. Because when we look at HDC, where there are workers, you have workers acted in positions and they're not being paid. So HDC is receiving the work, but the workers are not receiving the benefit of the pay. And you have in there workers on contract for 10, 15, 20 years without the benefit of a permanent appointment. And now they are talking about restructuring, or they want to use fancy words like reorganization. And they are asking workers to make a choice in relation to whether or not you want to be in HDC or in the new company. But they can't answer the simple question as the employer, what happens to my service? I have worked with the HDC for 10, 20 years as whether be on contract, whether permanent. What happens to the years that I've served as HDC? Does it come across in the new entity with me? What does my pay look like? What are my terms and conditions over there? And while HDC continues to exist, let me say, Mikey, that workers are seeing their jobs handed over to employees in the restructured company, which we see this as a way to force workers in the direction they want them to go, both permanent and contract. Let me say this. HDC workers have families and they are citizens of this country, and they have more than just the right to a job, but the right to a permanent job. And that is why the theme of today's May Day, Unitify, the headline of May Day today, is relevant today more than ever.
And let me ask you this, Ms. Thomas. I mean, when you sit there with your members, and I think this is where the disconnect comes from. You sit with your members and you hear the stories. You hear the stories of members who come to you and say, listen, I have to compromise my sexuality just to put food on the table. I have to try to see how best I can provide for my family. You have members who are telling you that they're emasculated by the policies of the government. They feel less of a man because they can't provide for their family. And yet when you go to the table to negotiate, whatever policy is put before you, they simply say, just sign it. Don't take any of those things in consideration, and you must bow your head and go back to your members and say, listen, this is what is being offered. It must be heart-wrenching for you to deal with this, as well as compounded by frustration.
Well, Mikey, let me see. You are talking with the PSA, and at no point in time will the PSA allow that anything be shoved down our throats that we feel is unfair and unjust for our members. That if anything is brought to the table that we feel to be unfair and unjust, we will say to our membership, we will fight. We will fight to ensure that better is given, that workers are respected, and we fight on.
Yeah, but these members don't want to live, they don't exist in the politics. And I think what really and truly amazes many people is that getting into office, you would ride on the backs of the same union, the same members, but once you get into office, the word union is somewhat of a nasty, filthy word. Why is that?
Well, Mikey, we're talking about human beings. And we have a duty as the union to ensure that we rally our members to ensure that they have the facts and that they understand what is before them. Mikey, I want to talk a little bit about Wasa, you know.
Go ahead.
Because you also mentioned that I represent Wasa, the PSA represents Wasa, and it is another place where we are seeing workers on the breadline. Just as Petrotrin and just as TSTT, we had the politicians taken to platforms and spreading a particular narrative without stating the facts. I want to talk a little bit about Wasa.
Go ahead.
Because we see what they are doing as just a distraction to the population, a distraction from the real issues. And for those who don't know, let me share with you what some of the issues are. Because they keep talking about overtime in Wasa, Wasa being overstaffed, as though being overstaffed, which I will share with you, is not a fact in Wasa. That the issues in Wasa is one, that we have an aged infrastructure. And when you have an aged infrastructure, that leads to multiple leaks. And when there are leaks and breakages on the line, you have unplanned repairs. And when you have unplanned repairs, you have to call out workers, which attracts overtime. Those are some of the things linked to aging infrastructure. Then we have an inadequate metering. And as a result of that, there's no relation between water consumption and the price paid, that you could see your neighbor have their tank overflowing for days, for months, without any consideration. Why? Because that doesn't affect what they pay. We have inadequate tariffs, that it is substantially low and bears no relation to the cost of production of water. Outstanding receivables, 1 billion owed to Wasa by residential customers. But guess who? 172 million thereabout owed by government agencies. And those are the issues in Wasa. That the issue is not production. Wasa produces about 240 imperial gallons per day. And when you look at that per capita, we produce 185 gallons per capita. And when you compare that to places like Jamaica, they produce 65 gallons per capita. So the issue is not production. Here's what one of the issues is. Again, we go back to the tariffs. That in Wasa, notwithstanding we produce sufficient water for the population, they pay $1.61 per cubic meter, as compared to Jamaica, where they pay $13.65, and that is in TT. And in Trinidad, you pay $7.32 for 1,000 gallons of water, but we pay $8 for a 650 ml bottle of water. And while they attack the workers, they won't tell you that workers take monies out of their own pockets to get Wasa work done, because funding has not been forthcoming from the state. They won't tell you that Wasa workers do not have the resources or equipment to fix leaks, and only when the public make an issue, resources are provided. They won't tell you that Wasa workers have been working without the benefit of promotion and appointment, with 477 vacancies on the structure, that persons are retiring and some dying without receiving their appropriate pension. They have said to the population that Wasa is severely overstaffed. But under this government, and I say this government with intent, they have recently employed over 100 engineer trainees. The same organization that they have said to the population is overstaffed, and they are restructuring.
Yeah.
And I understand that they are about to bring in 200 more persons in the commercial department. But we know why. It is all part of their plan and their strategy to take the jobs of Wasa workers. And
That's
we,
right,
Mikey, must question their intentions in all matters.
and stand strong.
I can clearly say that the intentions are not to improve the water supply of this population, but rather to continue to roll back what has been won through the struggle of labor and destroy the working class by making us the working poor.
And I know you're not going to sit idly by and let that happen. Our time is up, but just remember, unite to fight. And we will continue this interview. I want to thank you so much, and the Wasa workers.
Mikey,
go ahead.
I want to say in closing, because there's something important, and maybe I'll come back and talk about it, because we have an important issue to deal with in NIPDEC. That we're talking about negotiations where you see NIB is before the court, that the government doesn't want to pay them their 9% that was signed and agreed, but we are seeing the same thing that NIPDEC workers are faced with, that we were offered 9%. They withdrew that. They offered 002. They withdrew that and then offered 5%, agreed and make arrangement to sign off, and then pull back. Mikey, that's something we need to talk about.
Next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. If you're talking NIPDEC, next Wednesday, you definitely, Vice President, definitely next Wednesday. I want to thank you. Unite to fight. We stand in solidarity with you. Keep up the good work, and we will have you back next Wednesday for part 2 of this interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you, Comrade.